Hey, I'm Courtney Waterman, your tutor. Lover of anime, manga, and math. And you just tuned into another session of Tutor Me Sempai. Welcome back, everyone. Today I'll be giving you more math tips for the non-calculated portion of the PSAT. The focus of today's video are going to be on questions that ask you which of the following. If you're new to my channel, I'll be putting time codes in for this video in the description box below so you can skip ahead to whatever part of the video you find most interesting. If you find yourself with questions about what you see here or even your own homework, remember you can put them in the comment box below or visit me on Facebook at Tutor Me Sempai and tell me all about it there. When you find this video helpful, remember to leave a like, hit the notification bell, smash the subscribe button, and share this video with a friend. Well, without further ado, let's jump right into some time-saving tips. Now, you may have already guessed what that first hint is going to be for today when we're focusing on questions that ask you which of the following. If you didn't, spoiler alert, it's in the title of this video. We're going to be using our answers. When we deal with which of the following type questions, we want to mainly focus on the answers. I know we can do stuff with the question, and that will sometimes be necessary. However, there will be a lot of times you can save that time if you focus on the answers and see if you can go from there. So let's look at this first question and I'll show you what I mean. Here we have a question that's asking which of these four choices are equivalent to something they gave you in the question. So our choices are s over t minus s for A, s over t minus st for B, s squared over t minus s for C, and s squared over t minus s over t squared. And we want to know which of these are equivalent to s minus t, in parentheses, times s over t. Now, the reason why tip 1 is using your answer or start with your answers, we want to eliminate having to do much more work than necessary. We can always start with what they give us in the question. You can do that. However, this will require us to multiply this out, and then hopefully we see what we need to see. If not, we have additional steps. For example, this will translate to something like this. Then you see, oh, none of these actually match. Let's break this up a little bit more, which can go to. Then you'll see, wait, none of these match this either. Let's simplify some more, which that's going to go to. And before you know it, you've done all this extra work just to end up at C. However, you can easily find the same answer if you started with your answers first. And let me show you how. So we're going to use tip 1, start with our answers, and then we'll follow it up with tip 2, which is identify contradictions. So what do I mean by identify contradictions? Well, we're going to check out these answers that they give us, and we're going to see which one is going to be impossible based on maybe the existence of something extra, or maybe it's missing something that it needs to have to be matched up with what's in our question. So let's look at our answers here, and we see that A and B are missing an s squared, whereas C and D have an s squared. So do we need an s squared? If we need an s squared, this is going to be our first contradiction. Notice we have an s and an s here, and if you multiply those, you're going to get an s squared. So immediately, we can cancel out A and B. They don't have s squareds, but this is going to require us to have an s squared. You have an s in the top and an s in the top, and when you multiply those together, you're going to get an s squared. Nothing's going to simplify that. There has to be at least one s squared in your answer. So, boom, identify contradictions. Are there any more contradictions? Well, let's look at C and D. Are there any differences between them? Yes. You see that C doesn't have a t squared, but D does. Do we need a t squared? So let's look at our question. Well, you see we have a t in the denominator, but there's only one of them, right? There is no other t in this denominator here, so there is no way that we can get a t squared in a denominator. That's a contradiction. This does not have a t squared, but one of our answers does. So we can eliminate D. And you see, we didn't do much of any real math. We didn't kind of multiply this out or anything. We just looked at contradictions, and we were able to eliminate 3 of the 4 possible choices, and we got the same answer, C. So let's try our tips with our next question here. This question gives us a parabola, and it's saying that in this parabola, we have three constants. We don't know what their values are, but they're three constants. And this parabola has to pass through point -1, 1. And it wants to know which of these is true if it passes through -1, 1. Now, I'm going to be honest. Our tips are absolutely not necessary for this one. This one is very easy to do. You can simply plug it in. You can start with your question this time. However, what I'm going to show you is, what if you didn't have such easy numbers to plug in? What if these weren't just -1 and 1, and they were something much larger, thus making you have to do more work? So try to follow with the steps, and you can see how you don't need to use this to plug it in directly, because that can potentially save you some more time. So tip 1, start with our answers. We're going to look at our answers. And tip 2 is identify contradictions. We're giving a parabola with A, B, and C, right? And we are given the point -1, 1. Nothing that we were told tells us that A, B, or C are equal, and it doesn't have any way of canceling out anything, right? There's no zeros that we're plugging in. We don't have A, B, or C equal. So our answers should have A, B, and C because of that. Identify contradictions. Which answers do not have A, B, and C? A and B, right? These do not have A, B, and C. This is our first contradiction. Since nothing is going to be able to cancel out, we're not told that A equals B or B equals C or anything like that, and we're not plugging in any zeros, so you know that these are not going to go away. We have to have all of our constants in our answer. First contradiction. Now you look at C and D. What's different about them? You see that A is the same, C is the same, this one is the same. The only difference is the sign of your B. So now we go back to our question and we try to figure out which one of these makes sense. Well, we're going to focus just on B. So I'm going to ignore this A, don't need it. Ignore this C, don't need it. We ignore this Y, don't need it. So you see, we're essentially saving steps. If these were much larger numbers, we had to worry about all this other stuff. We don't have to plug any of that stuff in. We're just focused on this B here. More specifically, what's attached to that B? This X. And when we plug in this -1 for this X, we get a -B. So that means we should have a -B in our answer. Which one is our -B? D. So C is incorrect. D is our correct answer. How about this question here? We're given the expression 15x plus 24ax, and we're trying to find which one of these is equivalent. You can absolutely start with your question. You can start factoring this and seeing if you get something down here, A, B, C, or D. So let's do that. Let's say you ignored our tips and you started with the question. And you say, hey, I see things in common. They both have an X in common and they both have a 3 in common. And when I filter both of those out, I get this. So now you have this answer and you have to compare it to A, B, C, or D. Do you have this answer present? No, you realize you've done more work than necessary and you've put yourself in this hole. And if you didn't realize you were in a hole, you might have accidentally jumped on C because it looks the most similar. But notice that C doesn't have this 3 here. So C is not going to be your answer. This is why I say let's start with our answers, because when you start with the question, you wouldn't necessarily know when to stop. So we want to start with our answers, and we have these crazy looking things with parentheses and stuff, and we notice off bat, the only one that doesn't have parentheses is A. These 3 do. That's a major sign there. This one is the only one. Well, there's no way you're going to combine those. There's no way, because we don't know what that A is. So we can't just simply combine those. So A is automatically out of it. Now we have these parentheses, which makes us think, hey, we're going to have to probably factor things out, right? But because we're starting with our answers, you're really going to distribute. And if you can distribute and get your question back, then you found your answer. However, now I got another tip for you. My third tip for you is start smart. Not all your answers are created equal. I want you to look over your answers and take note of anyone that jumps out at you. This could potentially save you some work, especially if the one that jumps out at you is your last choice. You would have to go through A, B, C before you get to D if you just went from top to bottom. Start smart. Just glance over your answers and see, hey, Does anything stand out? And I will let you know, the one thing that stands out to me is D. I have a 15 here. I have a 24 here. There's an A and there's an X. This has all the makings of being my answer. Next, I move to step 2. Can I identify any contradictions in this that will dismiss this one? This one looks like it's the most likely, but if I find a contradiction, that means it's not the answer. So let's look for our contradictions. Well, if I distribute this X out, I will get 15X plus 24AX. They both have an X. This one has an A, and the numbers are the same, our coefficients. So that means that this has no contradictions. That means this is our answer. So you see, by starting smart, we didn't even have to eliminate B and C. D jumped out at us, so we immediately tried to identify any contradictions in that answer. If there is none, you've found your answer. You can stop there. If you find a contradiction, then you move on to the next one. But start smart. Don't work too hard going from top to bottom because your answer could very well be the last choice. Let's do one more example. So our last question gives us this equation here, and it's asking which of the following is the solution to the equation. So our tip 1 tells us to start with our answers, and tip 2 tells us to identify any contradictions. Well, the first contradiction that jumps out to me is this 0 here. When I look at what they give me in the question, there's no X for this 3, but everything else has an X. So if I was to plug in 0, this entire left side would go away, but there will be a 3 left on this side, and 0 doesn't equal 3. That's a contradiction. Therefore, we know that 0 is not going to be the answer. However, just by looking at it, we can't necessarily determine if there are any more contradictions. We have to kind of plug in and see what we get. This is where tip 3 really starts to shine. Start smart doesn't just pertain to our answers. It really just means your question, you want to start smart. The entire question. Think smart. Don't give yourself more work if you can eliminate something in the beginning. So in this case, I noticed by looking at this that there's an X squared on both sides. And if I was to plug in all of these numbers, I would be giving myself twice as much work because there's an X squared on the left and on the right. Now that wouldn't be really smart to do when you have a timed test, right? You don't want to give yourself more work if you can eliminate something to do less work. So my first thing would be, okay, is there any way I can combine those before I start plugging in all of my answers? I don't want to look at this 6 and have to square it here, times it by 2, square it here, and times it by 3. So in this case, I would actually try to condense my X squareds to get something simpler, or at least to get only one of them. And when I do that, I would move this X squared over here, and I would rewrite this as a 4X equals 3. And what do you get when you move over this 2x squared to this side? Well, you get a plus x squared. So now this is the equation I have left. 4x equals 3 plus x squared. Notice it's only 1x squared, and we actually get an extra bonus, a little boost, because there is no coefficient anymore. That means we're just simply going to plug in our number, square it, and that's it. We don't have to multiply by any coefficient. So you see, just from doing that, from noticing the x squared was on both sides, we've saved a bunch of steps. We no longer have to plug it in 2 times, and we don't have to do any multiplication to any coefficients. Now we simply plug it in and see what we have. So when we start with A, you get a -4. And what do you get on this side? Well, -1 squared is going to be +1, so that's a 4. Doesn't work. A is not the answer. How about C? Well, you're going to get a 12 here, and you're going to get a 3 plus 9. Well, what's 3 plus 9? Well, that's 12. 12 equals 12. That means our answer is going to be 3. You're not going to get 2 answers that are going to be true for this, so you can stop there. So when we plug in our answers, C is the correct answer for this question. So you see, start smart doesn't just mean which one of our answers you want to start with. It really kind of pertains to the entire question. If there's something you can do to help yourself eliminate something really quickly or save yourself some work really quickly, do that. The name of the game is to save time. So I hope you had fun on today's examples, and I hope you found today's tips helpful. As with all the tips I've given you so far, and the tips I'll give you in the future, there won't always be a time where everything is going to work. Your goal is to use the tips when you can to save whatever time you can while you're doing your PSAT. Well, if you had any questions about what you saw here today, or even your own homework, remember you can put them in the comment box below, or you can visit me on Facebook at Tutor Me Sempai and tell me all about it there. If you haven't done so already, remember to leave a like, hit the notification bell, smash the subscribe button, and share this video with a friend. Well, that's all the time I have for today. I'm really hoping this helped with your PSAT prep, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again next week. I'm Courtney, and this is another session of Tutor Me Sempai.